Brennan Sutter squinted into the darkening sky as the last of the twin suns dipped below the horizon of Gherek 4. The air cooled faster than expected, and a low hum vibrated through the soil beneath his boots. He adjusted the strap of his field pack and turned toward the alien figure pacing in front of the assembled trainees. Professor Ural's skin pulsed an iridescent green in the low light, a sign Brennan had learned meant agitation or preparation. Probably both. The professor's long limbs moved with mechanical precision as he addressed the group. "The survival drill begins in 30 standard minutes," Ural announced, his translator box humming against his chest. "You will be deployed into Zone Delta. Conditions will be night cycle, visibility near 0. Objective: reach the extraction beacon without triggering perimeter drones or becoming incapacitated." Brennan felt the collective unease ripple through the group. The other trainees, all from different species, shifted, muttered, or blinked in whatever way their biology allowed. Brennan just exhaled slowly. "No artificial lighting permitted," Ural continued. "Infrared systems will be disabled at start. You will rely on instinct, memory, and adaptation. Failure will be noted." The professor's gaze swept the group, pausing briefly on Brennan before moving on. Back in the barracks, Brennan dumped the contents of his tool pouch onto his cot. A broken comms unit, 2 cracked drone lenses, a thermal regulator diode, and the remains of a maintenance bot sensor suite clattered onto the thin blanket. He glanced at the wall chrono. 22 minutes left. "All right," Brennan muttered, rubbing his face. "Let's see what we can do." He pried open the comm unit and salvaged the power coupler. The drone lenses, although scratched, could still refract low-level ambient light. He snapped one into place inside a goggle frame he'd made from his broken field visor, then wired in the sensor suite's residual light amplifier. The regulator's capacitor could stabilize the power flow if he bridged it with the diode. His fingers moved fast, practiced. He didn't have time for finesse. Just enough solder to hold the rig together, just enough juice to survive the night. 10 minutes to go. He slid the goggles over his head and flicked the improvised switch. The internal display flickered once, then stabilized. The outlines of the room sharpened into grainy green contrast. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than blind guessing in pitch black. He stuffed the rest of the parts into his belt pouch and stepped into the hallway, where Ural and a few assistant monitors waited. The professor noticed the goggles immediately. "Candidate Sutter," Ural said, voice even but clipped. "Explain." "Scavenged materials from the maintenance bay and my own kit. No external power sources. All within regulation limits unless you changed those since yesterday." Ural's skin flared a deeper green for a moment, then dimmed. "Noted." Brennan gave a respectful nod and joined the line. The other trainees glanced at his goggles but said nothing. The launch pad vibrated as the transport drone descended, a wide, low-slung vehicle designed for mass deployment. Inside the drone, the lights dimmed as Ural spoke again. "You will be dropped in randomized sectors of Zone Delta. The terrain is unstable. Wildlife is active. You have 6 hours to reach the beacon." The drone doors hissed open one by one, releasing the trainees into darkness. Brennan's boots crunched onto loose gravel. The wind stirred dead, dry moss around him as he crouched low. He activated the goggles. Grainy green vision sprang to life enough to make out jagged rocks, a slope leading downward, and scattered heat signatures in the distance. Probably the perimeter drones. He moved quickly, crouching low and keeping to the narrow crevices. Every few meters, he paused to recalibrate the goggles. The left lens vibrated slightly with each step. A wire must have come loose. He slapped it gently and kept moving. A shriek echoed from somewhere ahead, an animal call, high-pitched and fast. Brennan froze. The goggles picked up heat movement to his left, low to the ground, moving fast. He ducked behind a boulder and slowed his breathing. The creature passed within 2 meters, sniffing the air. Small, quadruped-scaled, not immediately aggressive, just territorial. Brennan waited until it disappeared over the ridge before moving again. An hour passed. then another. Halfway up a slope, Brennan's foot slipped, sending him sliding. He twisted to catch himself, but his ankle caught on a buried root. Pain lanced up his leg as he tumbled. When he came to a stop, he lay still, panting. He tried to stand. Agony not broken, he hoped, but definitely sprained. He pulled himself under a ledge, teeth clenched. The goggles were still intact, although one lens was now smeared with dirt. He inspected the ankle. Swelling had already begun. He tore strips from his undershirt and bound it as tight as he could manage. Then he lay back for a minute, letting the pain settle into something manageable. "Just a sprain," he muttered. "You've had worse." He forced himself upright and leaned heavily on a broken branch he'd found. The terrain grew steeper. Movement became a calculated effort. The goggles flickered now, and then he adjusted the sensor suite's position and kept going. 3 hours in, he reached the edge of a dried-out ravine. The beacon was on the other side, its signal faint but steady. Between him and it, a web of motion sensors blinked red in his display. A narrow path wound its way through the rocks, too narrow to walk normally. He'd have to crawl. He took a breath, dropped to his stomach, and began inching forward. Every movement sent jolts through his ankle. Sweat dripped from his temple into his eyes. He blinked it away and kept moving. Halfway through, a sensor triggered with a soft alarm. Brennan froze. A drone spun into view overhead, scanning. He didn't move. The goggles dimmed. It was drawing too much power. He flicked the switch off and closed his eyes. The drone hovered, then moved on. Brennan waited a full minute before turning the goggles back on. The display returned, dim but usable. He reached the far end of the ravine and pulled himself up. The beacon was now less than 200 meters away. His ankle throbbed with each step, but he didn't stop. When he finally stumbled into the beacon's clearing, the light was blinding through the goggles. He collapsed next to it, arm outstretched to activate the signal. The extraction drone arrived 20 minutes later. Back at base, Ural stood over him as a medic examined his ankle. "You should not have been able to navigate Zone Delta unaided," the professor said. "I wasn't unaided," Brennan said through clenched teeth. "I had 2 cracked lenses, a power diode, and a bit of luck." Ural's skin shifted to a muted blue. "You adapted," the professor said. "This will be noted." Brennan nodded, exhausted. "Just write down that I'm not doing it again without proper boots." The medic pressed a cold scanner to his ankle. "Sprain," she said. "Moderate, you'll need rest, compression, elevation, no walking for at least a week." Brennan groaned but nodded. "Fair." Ural turned and walked away, leaving Brennan with the medic and his battered goggles. He leaned back on the cot and stared at the ceiling. "Worth it," he muttered. The infirmary on Gherek 4 didn't have walls so much as translucent membranes, pulsing faintly with filtered light that shifted color depending on who walked past. Brennan lay on a low cot, legs suspended by a sling of woven biotech fibers that adjusted pressure every 10 minutes. The ankle had ballooned impressively by now, dark purple bruising spreading up toward his shin. He'd counted 4 shades so far, none of them reassuring. Across the room, a pair of Frensari cadets were trying to figure out which end of a human crutch went under the arm. One of them kept flipping it upside down, the other sniffed it as if expecting it to secrete something edible. "Pretty sure it doesn't dispense snacks," Brennan said without sitting up. The taller Frensari blinked both sets of eyelids and rotated the crutch with a soft chitter. "It is poorly balanced," he said, "and made of inferior polymers. You should request a stabilizer frame." "Yeah, we call that a wheelchair," Brennan replied. "But thanks." A soft ping echoed from the ceiling, and a med assistant appeared thin, with a single vertical eye and skin like molten wax that never quite settled. She didn't speak but gestured for Brennan to sit up. Then she pointed at his foot with unmistakable intent. "I'm not arguing," Brennan said. "Just warning you this is going to smell like bad decisions and regret." She blinked slowly, unamused. Then she knelt and began unwrapping the makeshift bandage he'd tied on during the drill. "I didn't have much to work with," he said, watching her work. "Field shirt, some grit, and pure adrenaline." The assistant glanced up, then pulled a small scanning puck from her belt. She waved it over the ankle and a soft hiss emerged. The puck's side glowed amber. She held it there longer. "That's a long scan," Brennan muttered. "Either you're uploading my skeletal structure to a dating app or something's not good." She tapped the puck twice and showed him the display. A 3D rendering of his ankle spun slowly, revealing a neat tear in the ligament and bone trauma near the talus. "Okay, so." "Not just a sprain," Brennan said. She gave a single nod and stood. Moments later, she returned with a thin container filled with viscous blue gel and a curved splint that shimmered slightly, probably bioadaptive. She coated the inside of the splint with the gel and motioned for him to brace. "Wait, is that going to?" She pressed the splint around his ankle in one motion. The gel hissed as it activated, hardening rapidly with a crackle. Brennan clenched both fists. "Right, that answers that. Ligament damage," a new voice said from the entrance. "You're lucky. Another 10 meters and it would have ruptured completely." Brennan turned his head to see Ural, pale tendrils on his arms coiled tightly, a sign of restrained tension. He stepped into the room, ignoring the Frensari cadets who scattered like startled insects. "I was lucky a lot last night," Brennan said. "Not the least of which was not being eaten." Ural approached the cot. "I reviewed the footage. Your approach through the sensor corridor was unconventional. I crawled like a wounded animal through a nest of hair trigger security systems." "I'm not sure unconventional covers it. You bypassed 6 motion nodes using reflection interference. I used scratched lenses and a bent light filter from a drone casing. I was hoping they'd just be dirty enough to fool the sensors." Ural tilted his head. "You engineered a low-grade cloaking effect using debris. Or I got really lucky." "No," Ural said. "You solved a problem. Improvisation under pressure is not common among most species. They panic. You adapt." Brennan didn't respond right away. He flexed his fingers, watching the gel splint settle into a deeper blue. The discomfort had dulled to a persistent ache. "Is this the part where you promote me to assistant professor?" Ural's skin flashed a quick silver. "No, this is the part where I inform you that you're being reassigned." Brennan straightened slightly. "Reassigned? I just passed your death obstacle course. You passed it in a way that suggests your talents are wasted in standard training. The Diplomatic Contingency Corps has requested you for a cross-species survival symposium on Hekari Prime." Brennan blinked. "You're sending me to a conference because I jury-rigged some night vision. You will be demonstrating your methods to coalition delegates." The invitation was expedited. Brennan stared. "You're serious? Your transport leaves in 2 days. Your ankle will be stabilized by then." "Right. Interstellar travel with a healing leg, that won't be awkward." Ural stepped back. "Your recovery will be monitored. Additional medical clearance will be required before departure." As he turned to leave, Brennan raised a hand. "Wait, who exactly are these delegates?" "Representatives from 12 species. Most of whom are unfamiliar with human field behavior. So they're expecting a lecture? They are expecting a demonstration." Brennan laid back on the cot and stared at the ceiling membrane, which was now pulsing a soft orange with the setting light outside. He exhaled slowly. "Of course they are." The following day arrived with a sharp jab to his leg. The med assistant returned, this time wielding a thin needle and a pouch of anti-inflammatory serum. Brennan winced but didn't complain. "You enjoy this," he said. She didn't blink. He spent the rest of the day in a mobility harness that allowed him to move without putting weight on the leg. The training center's courtyard had been converted into an observation zone, complete with temporary shelters and a field kitchen that smelled aggressively like boiled algae. By evening, he had a visitor. The creature was tall, cloaked in a robe that shimmered like oil on water. Its face was a mass of thin tendrils that fluttered when it exhaled. "You are the human," it said in a voice like shifting sand. "Last I checked," Brennan replied. "I am Vectel. Observational envoy for the chiral continuum. I reviewed the mission logs. And You endured physical trauma and completed the course using unverified optics. Sounds about right. This suggests either recklessness or ingenuity. Why not both? Vektal's tendrils danced briefly. There is interest in your methods. You will present them in simulated conditions on Hekari Prime. Brennan looked toward the distant landing pad. And if I say no, you will not, Vektal said. Then he turned and walked away. Brennan muttered, apparently not. The next morning came with a delivery new clothes, a datapad containing the symposium itinerary, and a message from a human diplomat he'd never met. The datapad blinked with one highlighted line, please refrain from building anything during the flight. He laughed once, then winced as the splint adjusted again. 2 days later, he limped aboard a light transport bound for Hekari Prime, flanked by 2 silent security drones and the same med assistant, now apparently his escort. She carried a shock baton and a bag of medical patches. Think they'll be impressed? He asked her as the doors sealed. She didn't answer. He looked out the viewport as the engines warmed. I'll take that as a maybe. The descent into Hekari Prime was smoother than Brennan expected, though the ship's inertial dampeners had a slight wobble that made his teeth knock together during the final approach. The med assistant, still unnamed and still expressionless, handed him a nutrient pack as the docking clamps engaged. Thanks, Brennan said, squinting at the thick purplish liquid inside. Looks like someone juiced a sea anemone. She handed him a straw without comment. The Symposium Center was a sprawling lattice of crystalline walkways suspended over a boiling mineral lake. The air was heavy with salt and something vaguely metallic. Brennan had to squint as they crossed the bridge. Sunlight refracted through the structure in a dozen directions, giving everything a jagged halo. His ankle brace buzzed faintly with each step, recalibrating for the incline. Inside, the temperature dropped sharply. The reception chamber was circular, lined with tiered seating and a raised platform at the center. Delegates were already gathering, many of them tall or tentacled, radiating colors that shifted with their mood. Brennan spotted only one other human, a woman in a sharp navy coat, standing near the translator pillar. She glanced at him once, then returned to her datapad. He limped to the edge of the platform, where a squat being with 6 eyes and a fan of gills greeted him. You are the human engineer, it said, voice bubbling through a translator bead. Technically, I'm just a cadet, Brennan said, but yes, I'm the guy with the goggles. The being's eyes pivoted individually. We reviewed the footage. You constructed an optical augmentation using discarded parts, yes, more or less. It wasn't elegant. The elegance is irrelevant, the function is not. A chime rang through the chamber. Delegates began settling, murmurs fading as the lights dimmed to a chilly blue. Begin, the fan guild being said, stepping aside. Brennan stepped onto the platform. His brace clicked softly. He set down the components he'd brought in a shallow tray. The cracked lenses, the scorched diode, the salvaged sensor node, and the battered goggle frame. No enhancements, no upgrades. Just what he had during the drill. All right, he said, adjusting the mic on his collar. Here's what I had. A busted comms unit, 2 lenses from a drone that had been dropped at least twice, 1 half-burnt diode, and a heat sensor from a maintenance bot that had been stepped on. My goal wasn't to make something perfect, just something good enough to not get eaten. A ripple of color passed through the chamber. Interest, maybe. I didn't have schematics, he continued. Didn't have a toolkit. Just a solder pen, my teeth, and a lot of misplaced confidence. He held up the lenses. These were scratched to hell. Normally that'd be a problem, but I realized the imperfections created scatter patterns. Under low light, that gave me just enough contrast to spot movement. A long-limbed delegate with a translucent skull leaned forward, emitting a low oscillation. You used optical distortion intentionally. I used what I had, Brennan said, and I noticed the scratches weren't random. They actually filtered out some of the ambient glare. It wasn't clean, but it worked. He assembled the components slowly. The goggle frame clicked into place, the diode buzzed once as he bridged it with a spare wire. The display flickered to life. "Here," he said, "still works." "Kind of." A delegate near the back raised a spindly appendage. "How did you handle power regulation? Those components operate on incompatible voltage streams." "I didn't," Brennan said. "I just kept the diode between the capacitor and the lens array and hoped it wouldn't melt." It got warm, but not dangerous. A few translated murmurs echoed through the room. Another delegate, this one with a carapace that shone like obsidian, emitted a clicking tone before speaking. "You risked field blindness and neural feedback." "Why not retreat or await extraction?" "Because the objective wasn't survival," Brennan said. "It was completion. I knew I'd be penalized if I didn't reach the beacon. Plus, sitting still in Zone Delta isn't exactly safe either." "So you gambled," the carapace delegate said. "I adapted," Brennan said. "That's what we do." The translucent skull being leaned in again. "Are humans purpose-built for failure conditions?" "No," Brennan said. "We're just really bad at giving up." A few of the delegates shifted colors again, some pale, some bright. Brennan couldn't decode it, but the energy in the room had changed. Less scrutiny, more curiosity. He stepped back and let them examine the goggles up close. One delegate sniffed them, recoiling slightly at the faint ozone smell. After the demonstration, Brennan was guided to an auxiliary chamber lined with soft cushions and low luminescent panels. The air felt thinner here, easier to breathe. The woman in the navy coat entered, now minus the datapad. "Major Lorne," she said. "Human liaison to the Continuum Council," Brennan nodded. "Cadet Sutter." "I saw the footage," she said, "and the improvisation today, nicely done." "Thanks, I wasn't sure how they'd take it." "You unsettled half of them," she said. "The other half are filing requests for joint field drills." "You've essentially disrupted 3 decades of procedure." "Is that good?" "It's very human." Brennan exhaled, sinking into the cushion. "So what happens now? You're being debriefed. Then transported back to Gherek 4 for reassignment review." "Reassignment, possibly." "You're flagged for cross-species operations training. Your ankle won't hold you back. Your file says you've already started healing faster than projected." "Yeah, turns out panic makes a decent painkiller." She smiled faintly. "We'll send you with a med tech this time." "One who talks." Brennan glanced around the chamber. "Do they always look at us like we're magic tricks?" "No," Lorne said. "Just when we survive things we shouldn't." He stood slowly, testing his weight. The brace held firm, no pain now, just a dull pressure. He still couldn't run, but he could walk without flinching. As they left the chamber, he paused near the exit. One of the delegates, the Fan Guild 1, was observing a projection of his goggles, rotating them slowly in a multidimensional simulation. "You planning to build your own?" Brennan asked. The being looked over. "No, we are attempting to understand how you built yours. It appears to violate several manufacturing principles." "I didn't violate them," Brennan said. "I just didn't know what they were." The being blinked all 6 eyes in succession, then turned back to the projection. Outside, the mineral lake hissed and bubbled beneath the suspended walkways. Brennan looked down at it, then at the sky, where distant shuttles glinted against the atmosphere. Lorne tapped her calm. "Extraction teams ready. You'll be back on Gherek by second cycle." "Good," Brennan said. "I left my only decent boots there." They crossed the bridge in silence. The brace buzzed once more, then fell quiet. By the time they reached the shuttle, the sunlight had shifted and the lake below glowed amber. Brennan turned once, looking back at the crystalline structure. "I didn't know I'd be teaching aliens how to squint through scratched lenses." "You didn't," Lorne said. "You taught them how not to wait for permission." As the shuttle lifted off, Brennan leaned back in the seat, one hand resting on the brace, the other still smudged with solder from the demo. He closed his eyes just for a moment, already thinking about what he could do with a fully stocked toolbench. Maybe something with thermal contrast, or sound triangulation, or maybe he'd just fix his boots. Either way, he'd be ready.